Blog Talk Radio.
It seems we have a problem. I would like to introduce
Bigfootspad Paranormal Investigations Team.
Another edition of Bigfoot Pad Paranormal Radio. On the line with me today, I have Brent, Tim, and Nick, basically the whole entire panel. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about the Yeti and the Bigfoot of that area of the world. So Nick, how are you doing today?
Doing fine. How's everybody else doing?
Doing all right.
A little tired.
Tim's as tired as a Bigfoot.
Yeah, sleepy Bigfoot in his den. In his pad.
Well, I'm going to start with a little bit of news articles, current paranormal news, and world news, I guess. Artificial lab-grown steaks that taste and feel just like the real thing could be around the corner thanks to a generous grant from PayPal's co-founder. Billionaire investor Peter Thiel has backed an American startup to develop its 3D bioprinting technique to create juicy steaks. To help Modern Meadow achieve their goal, Thiel has offered a grant of between 160,000 and 220,000 euros through the Thiel Foundation's Breakout Labs. Co-founder Andres Forgax, I think is how you say that, has criticized the overall cost of the traditional agriculture practices used to farm animals. Apparently, he said, if you look at the resources intensity of everything that goes into a hamburger, it's an environmental train wreck, says the field. The company believes that by carefully layering mixtures of cells of different types in a specific structure, the vitro meat production becomes feasible. So what do you think about that, Brent?
So basically they're trying to make steak, like a different...
Yeah, they're going to make steaks artificially in a lab.
But would it, give you the same, beneficial nutrients that your body needs, though?
I'm not sure. They didn't really talk about that too much.
If it's going to be, exactly the same and taste the same and give you the same stuff, I wouldn't really mind. But it would be kind of weird that it's artificially made in a lab.
Well, there is actually a good point to make, though, really quick. The meat that you buy from the grocery store is already filled with so many hormones, and it is genetically modified and filled with various other chemicals. It's so processed that you're basically eating synthetic meat already. So making synthetic meat totally would not be a very far jump from where we are already now. So the stuff that you buy from the grocery store is not pure meat. It's injected with so many different types of chemicals, and it's treated with radiation and various other things that'll take too long to go through here, but we already basically eat very synthesized meat.
Well, here's my next article. A team of archaeologists has uncovered the remains of hundreds of ancient warriors at the Danish bog known as Alpen Eng, or Engia, how do you say that? The skeletons, thought to date back to 2,000 years ago, appear to have been sacrificed at the bog. According to a written statement from Aarhus University, which conducted the dig along with collaborators from Denmark's other museums, it's clear that this must have been quite far-reaching and dramatic events that must have had profound effect on society at the time, says the project manager and professor of archaeology at Aarhus University. The particular motivation for the sacrifices remains unclear, but the Skanderborg Museum's website notes that the area has been a focal point for a wider hinterland as a place to conduct sacrificial rituals, which appear to have been taking place regularly during the ironing. So, over in this Danish bog, they're finding all these warriors for some reason that were sacrificed. They're not sure exactly why. What do you think about that, Tim?
That's pretty cool. I mean, probably for one of their warrior gods or something. I know they used to do blood sacrifices to ensure like they would win either battles or something along the lines of that, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still pretty cool though.
So this was back in the day, yeah.
Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
So this was back in the day when our ancestors were running around Europe with naked blue powdered bottoms and sacrificing to the Wicker Man.
2,000 years ago. Well, archaeologists have unearthed the skeletons of 16 human hands buried in 4 pits. 2 of the pits, located in front of what is believed to be a throne room, hold 1 hand each. 2 other pits, constructed at a slightly later time in an outer space of the palace, contain 14 others. They're all right hands, and there's no left hand. The hands appear to be the first physical evidence of a practice attested to in ancient Egyptian writing and art, in which a soldier would present the cut-off right hand of an enemy in exchange for gold. Cutting off the right hand specifically not only would have made counting victims easier, it would have served the symbolic purpose of taking away the enemy's strength. You deprive him of his power eternally, says a guy named Vitak. It's not known whose hands they were. They could have been Egyptian or the people of the Hyksos, which was the ruling power at the time in that area, as they were fighting a group called the Levant. It's over in Egypt, so that's pretty different.
Yeah.
Kind of like something Robert would like, kind of.
Oh, yeah. Finding dismembered hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
What do you think, Brent? You think that's a good discovery?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, the way they present, as a strength their right hand, because most people, I don't know if it was the same back then as it is now, but people are predominantly right-handed. So I could see why that could be their strength.
Well, I could think of a few right hands that Brent would have in Vegas. Can't you, Nick?
Yeah.
Well, Nick, I was going to say, is there any way you could say a little bit of teen news for a minute?
Oh, yeah. Well, we have a few things coming up here. We're kind of backlogging all of our goals and ambitions for now due to work and other things that come up. But, again, we want to head out and try to work on a Southern Nevada Desert Yeti documentary that has been in the works for I don't know how long. We want to work more in this case about a Nevada UFO crash that's not really talked about anywhere on the internet or anywhere else for that matter.
California.
We still need to go out and do
the 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. Oh, yeah, then we want to head out to Barker Ranch, the Manson Ranch, to do some ghost investigating and whatnot in that area. So we have quite a full agenda, a full plate on our hands for the next 6 months to a year. We would like to probably add some more stuff. We haven't done anything in a while as a team, which, again, is due to many factors, but hopefully we can all kind of put our heads down, grit our teeth, and try to get some stuff done, hopefully.
Yeah, because we're supposed to be filming a documentary of our own, I guess, when we go to California in 2 weeks. That'll be exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll get started with today's topic, because I have a few people asking about it. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about the Yeti and the snow Bigfoot. All right, well, I'll just give you like a general breakdown, and then we'll get into some stories and all that sort of thing. The Yeti, or Abominable Snowman, is an ape-like cryptid said to inhabit the Himalayan regions of Nepal and Tibet. It's believed to be taller than the average human and similar to a Bigfoot. The names Yeti and Meta are commonly used by the people indigenous to the region and are part of their history and mythology. Stories of the Yeti first emerged as a facet of Western popular culture in the 19th century. The scientific community generally regards the Yeti as a legend, but it remains one of the most famous creatures in cryptozoology. The Yeti may be considered a sort of parallel myth to the Bigfoot in North America. Before we get started on this, I was going to say, Nick.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on the Yeti?
I think the Yeti is most likely a creature that does exist. There are different types of evidence which would lead someone to believe something like that, including but not limited to, obviously, this video I saw back in high school, I think courtesy of King Sasquatch or King Gray, but a video of a Yeti walking on the snow in the Himalayas, which I think is pretty interesting. I don't know if you guys remember that film or not, but
oh yeah, I know.
I guess you could call it I guess you could call it the Patterson film of Yeti lore. So, in short, I basically do believe in the Yeti.
What do you think, Brent?
I think it's plausible that there could be a Bigfoot up in the Himalayas terrorizing people.
Well, ironically, we were thinking of going to Bhutan, of all places, to look for the Yeti. But yeah, that's another quick note. The Yeti, according to several different experts we've talked to, lives in Nepal, Bhutan, China, India, and Mongolia primarily. I don't really know too much about the Mongolia Yeti, which is ironic. I don't know, Tim, did you know that lives in Mongolia?
I've only heard about it before. I've never really heard any sighting reports from there, though, personally.
Well, I guess I'll get further into this. Well, in the pre-19th century, I have you kind of in chronological order. As soon as my notes, let's look at it. All right, well, in the pre-19th century, I wrote, according to H. Singer, I think you say his name, the Yeti was part of a pre-Buddhist beliefs of several Himalayan people. He was told that the Lepcha people worshipped the glacier being, as they called him, as a god of the hunt. He also reported that followers of the Bon region once believed the blood of the Myra god, or the wild man, had use in certain mystical ceremonies. The being was depicted as an ape-like creature who carries a large stone as a weapon and makes a whistling swoosh sound. Now, what's weird about that? Nick, they said that this Yeti, they were saying, uses it's depicted as using a weapon, or it's depicted as using large stones as weapons and sticks. How come you don't really hear about the North American Bigfoot doing that?
Well, as we've discussed in a previous show, aggressive Sasquatch attacks. Sasquatch attacks are not reported very frequently because of the rarity of Sasquatch sightings in general. But here in the United States, I know of a couple accounts off the top of my head, which you could, you listeners could go listen to in the aggressive Sasquatch episode, where the Sasquatch would, throw sticks at people, throw rocks, make wood knockings, and smash rocks together in order to intimidate people. I believe, again, I'd have to double check myself, but I believe that apes like chimpanzees and gorillas might do very similar types of behaviors in order to intimidate other species or other apes that are intruding onto their territory.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that there are stories nowadays of rocks being thrown, but they don't exactly hit the people. They kind of just land near them like a warning, like you were saying.
Yeah.
I know in one of our videos on our website from when we went to Northern California, we were actually getting rocks thrown at us. I don't know if you remember that video, Nick.
Yeah, I remember we had...
Because you were there in the video. It's when you were hearing that weird whistling sound.
Yeah, we heard a whistling noise coming back from the forest, which was a response to a whistle that I had made. And there were sticks and things being thrown in our general direction. You could hear things in the bushes around us. You could hear sticks and rocks landing probably 25 to 50 yards away from where we were. I guess this Sasquatch or whatever was following us didn't have great aim, but yeah, we definitely had something out there interacting with us.
Well, the other interesting thing, they said obviously the Buddhists, they were reporting this creature, it said, as a sort of god in the ancient times. Kind of strange because, like they were saying, like I said earlier, it wasn't really, Westerners didn't really even know about it mainstream until like the 1800s. And it says that they believed that they would use the blood of this creature in rituals. So I was just kind of curious, saying, how would you, that means they must have caught them before, right? Or they must have killed them or something.
Yeah. Well, often in even North American Bigfoot lore, you have the Native Americans documenting Sasquatch sightings hundreds to maybe 1,000 years or more before white Europeans came over and started seeing them. So this is not something that would be unexpected to me in Asia relating to the ancient Yeti sightings. So that's not unexpected. And yeah, they would have had to kill a Yeti in order to obtain its blood, which is pretty, I don't know, amazing, I guess. I'm just thinking about what it would take to rush a Sasquatch here in North America or anywhere to kill it. I mean, there's reports of Sasquatch taking high-caliber bullets and still acting like nothing happened, so they must have done something pretty amazing back then to kill a Yeti.
So, Brent, I was going to say, they said it made a whistling swoosh sound. From your expertise and your experience, do you think that sounds like a Bigfoot call that you've heard?
Yeah. It does kind of sound like something that I heard. You said it was like a whistling swoosh sound?
Yeah, it sounds like a whistle and a swish sound.
Swish. Yeah, that sounds similar to what I heard. I mean, it was, I guess it's
Nick, sorry to interrupt you. And Nick, is there any way you could do like your impersonation of the whistling swish sound that we heard?
I already knew this was coming. My impression of my paranormal impression of the week. First when we were out in the forest, I tried to do, my lips are kind of dry now, I'll try this. I tried to whistle out into the woods to see if I could get a response like this. My lips are kind of dry. And then we got something similar back, but it was more like a... It's like here, I'm going to have to do a really, really bad version. My lips are too dry to whistle. Something like that, I think. That's probably the best rendition I can give right now.
But Nick, but for our listeners, while that was occurring, this was a few years back in California, while that was occurring, we're actually getting those rocks were being tossed at us that I was telling you about earlier. What's kind of weird was on a past episode, like Brent was saying, right before this happened, you could hear something following us, almost parallel to us, off in the woods, as if when we would start walking, it would start walking, we would stop, it would stop, and whatever it was, we think it was the same creature. But anyways, back to the Yeti. In the 19th century, I wrote in 1832, James Prinsep's Journal of the Asiatic Society of Bengal published trekker B.H. Hodgson's account of his experiences in northern Nepal. His local guide spotted a tall, bipedal creature covered in long, dark hair, which seemed to flee in fear. Hodgson concluded that he thought it was an orangutan. And what's weird was they said this was one of the very first mainstream reports. Like I said, it was by a famous individual. And I don't think they have orangutans in that section of the world, right, Nick?
I don't believe so. I'm not very familiar with the geographical distribution of orangutans, but I don't think they have any out there.
Brent is.
What's up?
Well, I said I know when you were in high school or college, you said you took a course on orangutans or whatever. I was wondering, do you know exactly where their habitat is, Brent?
Mostly from what I've gathered, it's mostly in Southeast Asia, like, you know, in where's that at?
So do you think that an orangutan could have wandered from its normal habitat in southeastern Asia and wandered over into that region?
No.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I mean, here, I just want to put something else a little quickly, maybe to kind of balance the views a little bit, I don't know. But I know there was a special on the Discovery Channel a few years ago about the migratory patterns of grizzly bears going into polar bear territory, because there was a hunter, a bear hunter, you know, a guy that was going out and hunting grizzlies, and he shot this bear, which was really, really strange looking. It was a hybrid between a polar bear and a grizzly bear, because I believe they said that times hit either the polar or the grizzly bear, one of the populations was hit really hard environmentally by a drought or a lack of food or something. And both these populations crossed each other's paths in their migrations and started to breed and have these weird-looking hybrid bears. So it is possible for an orangutan to migrate outside of its normal area that it's found. I just wanted to throw that in there, perhaps educate the listeners and to balance the views out, I guess, a little bit.
I was just saying, Brent took that course in orangutan habits and behaviors. I was just wondering, just asking where they lived or whatever mostly. But an early record of reported footprints appeared in 1899 in Lawrence Waddell's book, Among the Himalayas. Waddell reported his guide's description of a large ape-like creature that left the prints, which Waddell thought were made by a bear. Waddell heard stories of bipedal, ape-like creatures and wrote that none, however, of the many Tibetans I've interrogated on the subject could ever give me an authentic case, is what he claimed. On the most superficial investigation, it always resolved into something that somebody heard of. So basically, this Waddell guy he's saying that he thinks that the whole creature's made up, that it doesn't even exist altogether. I know, I thought I'd throw that out there. So, Brent, if someone were to tell you that they don't think the Yeti existed, like Waddle says, what would you have to say?
I would say that I guess everyone's entitled to their own opinion.
No, but I mean, don't you think that there's evidence to show that this creature really does exist?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's just sometimes some people they just have to see it to believe it type of people.
Yeah. Well, in 1925, there's a guy named Tambazi. He's a photographer and member of the Royal Geographical Society. He wrote that he saw a creature at about 15,000 feet up near the Zemu Glacier. Tambazi later wrote that he observed the creature from about 200 to 300 yards away, and unquestionably, the figure in outline was exactly like a human being, walking upright and stopping occasionally to pull out some dwarf rhododendron bushes, I think you say that. It showed up dark against the snow, and as far as I could make out, it wore no clothes. And about 2 hours later, Tambazi and his companions descended the mountain and saw the creature's footprints. He described them similar to those of a man, but 6 or 7 inches longer, 4 or 5 inches wider, he says. The prints were undoubtedly those of a biped. Couple of things I'd like to note here. Obviously, he said he was up on the mountain, high up on the mountain, and the creature showed up dark against the snow. What's kind of odd is, wouldn't you think that this creature would be white or gray in color, you would think? Nick?
Yeah, I would think that a Yeti would match its surroundings, and that's true for any species that lives anywhere. Anything from monarch butterflies, which the underwings look like leaves in order to blend in with the surrounding forest, and then you have green bugs that go on green leaves, etc. So, yeah, I would think that the Yeti would evolve a color of fur that would match its surroundings. So a dark Yeti. This is actually something I've never heard before, of a dark Yeti, so this is pretty interesting.
Something I thought was kind of odd, though. They said that it was wearing no clothes. I mean, it's not out of the ordinary for the Yeti stories, but I'm just thinking, obviously that couldn't have been a man. And if it was, it would have froze to death pretty quickly up there, 15,000 square feet up.
Yeah.
On a glacier.
That's true.
Well, Western interest in the Yeti peaked dramatically in the 1950s. While attempting to scale Mount Everest in 1951, Eric Shipton took photographs of a number of large prints in the snow at about 20,000 square feet or feet above sea level. The photographs have been subject to intense scrutiny and debate. Some argue that the best evidence of the Yeti's existence, that's the best evidence that's out there, while others contend the prints are those of a fake or distorted or another creature's prints that are distorted. Tim, I know you know the footprints that I'm talking about. I don't recall what the picture is called, but what do you think of those?
Well, to be honest, I think they're pretty convincing, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think they look genuine, and I believe they...
Well, can you describe what you saw, though, to paint a picture for our listeners?
Well, of course, the pictures, but if I don't remember right, they obviously show like a human-shaped footprint with 5 toes, but they're just massive.
So I know there's about 10 or 15 in the picture. You can see like a trail.
Yeah, exactly. There's like a trail that leads to them, but I mean, you just want me to describe the general footprint. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, that's pretty interesting, though.
It says there's a town called Sikkim, Sikkim, in 1948. There's a guy named Peter Byrne who found a Yeti footprint in 1948 on the Zemu Glacier while on a holiday from the Royal Air Force in India. I guess it's in the same general area. That's just like a short thing, but a quick note nonetheless shows that there's reports in that area. Well, during the Daily Mail snowman expedition of 1954, the mountaineering leader John Angelo Jackson made the first trek from Mount Everest to Kanchenjunga, in the course of which he photographed symbolic paintings of the Yeti at Tangbacha Gompas, I think you say that. Jackson tracked and photographed many footprints in the snow, most of which were identifiable. However, there were many large footprints that couldn't be identified. These flattened footprint-like indentations were attributed to erosion and subsequent widening of the original footprint, he said. I don't know, so it kind of sounds like a lot of Westerners didn't believe that this thing really was a real creature until, like, at least the 50s or 60s. What do you think, Nick?
Well, I'm sorry, there was my phone cut out a little bit. What did you say about the village?
I said it sounds like Westerners didn't believe this creature was real until like 100 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well, I could see reason for skepticism. A healthy dose of skepticism is never bad, and I guess there could be reasons to not believe in the Abominable Snowman or the Yeti. One question that immediately comes to my mind is, what does this creature eat? I mean, think about it, when you look at other Sasquatch environments, North American Sasquatch, the traditional Bigfoot that we think of, you see the forest and there's plenty of plants and small animals, or even large animals. There's been reports of Sasquatch attacking deer. So there's plenty of things for the Sasquatch to eat here in North America. If you take a look at the sand Yeti, which is reported in some of the southwestern desert regions of the United States, there's less to eat, but there are small pockets of areas where there's water and some shrubbery and animals as well that the sand Yeti could potentially eat. So there's food and water for a Sasquatch to sustain itself in those environments, but in the Himalayas, I'm not very sure if there's a steady supply of food or even water, because all the water would be frozen unless they figured out how to melt the water and drink it. I wouldn't know, but so there are good reasons to be skeptical. However, sorry if I'm babbling on too long, but just to, I guess, wrap it up.
That's a good point. I was going to get to that in a minute. I got a good note to go along with that.
Okay. I was just going to say, to wrap it up, like I said earlier, it takes the Western world time to catch up to what the rest of the world has done. And sometimes it's vice versa, but it's just a classic example of us playing catch-up to what the Asians have already seen.
Well, that's an interesting note. It says there's 3 types of Yetis. According to accounts, there's 3 distinct types of Yetis. It says there's one called the Snowman, which is a fairly docile Yeti. It's a savage carnivorous beast, about 5 foot tall, long-haired ape-like of muscular build, and a little man, shy and shaggy. So basically there's a snowman, which is the one that lives up high. There's a carnivorous beast that lives at medium altitudes. And then there's a smaller one that lives down at the bottom of the mountain. And it says the snowman that has one popular recognition as the Yeti is a savage ape man that leaves its footprint high above the snow line, from 15,000 to 25,000 feet above. It says the snowmen are famous for a pungent odor and a high whistling call. And apparently they're all 3 similar, but not exactly. But an interesting note. They said that this creature has a pungent odor. You hear that all over with the North American Bigfoot and like the Yowie and all that. You hear all about these different smells, and I don't know. What do you think, Brent?
About what the three different kinds, or?
So what's your opinion on the 3 different kinds, or the pungent odor that people describe?
I never really thought about it as being 3 different kinds of big Yetis, but I mean, I guess there would be 3 different types. I mean, if they were all, you know, you'd think if there was 3 different types of Yetis, you might see a little bit more of them, but I guess they're all just as elusive.
Well, I mean, do you think that would be something that would be plausible, counting on some of them live high up on the mountain, some of them live down on the mountain? Or do you think that maybe just one type has traveled all around?
I think it could be, I don't know. In my opinion, I think there could be a possibility that there is, you know, that they could have multiple types of them living at different elevations. But I mean, we would actually have to just find out just to see for ourselves. But to me, in my opinion, that's what it seems like there is.
I know, Nick, you said that you believe in the creature could evolve for the elevation it lives at, right? For the food that's available and all that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we see. Let's talk about humanity. Let's talk about Homo sapiens for a second. We notice with, and I hope I don't get into nothing very, very controversial, but this is all scientific data. We see amongst the different races various different types of characteristics which help the different peoples of the earth survive their various environments. For instance, in Africa, you see, you know, if you watch the Olympics, you noticed a lot of the runners are African. They're tall, they're lean, and they can run fast. Well, that's because that's the type of behavior that they have to use to survive in Africa. Whether they're going to run to something or from something, or it's a genetic trait that has been passed on for generations in Africa, whereas you might see in Europe people that are not, people that are shorter, stockier, well, they have more muscle and fat on their bodies, but they're built more for strength because they don't have to run as much as the people in Africa have to. They have to lift things and haul things, in ancient and Paleolithic times. I'm talking about the origins of various different cultures, African, European, and I mean I could go on and on and on. In America, the slaves, when they were taken off the ships, they were selected based on their physical attributes, and then they were bred like dogs to make the strongest slaves, the biggest, fastest, strongest slaves possible, which would, yield the highest profit for the cotton farmer. So depending on various environmental factors, there are differences even within the human race. So it's not too much of an extension to say that there would be a difference in the Yetis. Here's one more example that might be a little less controversial. When Darwin went to, I believe, the Galapagos Islands, he noticed the difference in the beak sizes of the same species of bird, basically. He said one species of bird had a beak that was really pointy to get into the wood to get the insects, while another species of bird, which lived not too far away, had more of a crushing-shaped beak to crush seeds and nuts. Mm-hmm. So each bird had evolved a different type of beak in accordance with the environment that they lived in. So the Yeti would do the same thing. just like any other living organism.
An interesting note. A lot of people think the Yetis actually, they only think of the snowman, as the individual called it. They mostly think of that one, the one that lives high up on the mountains, and as that's like the one that you always see in pictures. They don't really know that there really is a Yeti that lives lower down in lower elevations, like kind of like a forest Yeti is the way I worded it. You don't really hear about that often.
No.
I think it's just because it's more exciting to hear about it up on the mountain, or I guess it could be just because that's where most of the tourists are, is up on the mountain.
Well, I think you had a really good point there, Jerry. You said it's more exciting. I mean, think about it. Look at the ancient people that we talked about in the beginning of the show, the Buddhist people, or whoever the people the Buddhists talked about. They worship the creature on top of the mountain. People like to look at amazing, lofty things. Why do you think the ancient Greeks made the home of the gods on top of Mount Olympus? Because a mountain symbolizes power and majesty and mystery and all these other things, and that really appeals to people. So in short, yes, it is more exciting to look at the snowman than to look at the forest Yeti, as you would call it.
Well, quite frankly, I think you're more likely to see it down in the forest anyways, is what I would think personally.
Oh, yeah.
If we were to go look for it, I would go down in the mountains, because
oh, yeah, definitely.
Because, well, of course we live in North America and know the habits of the Bigfoot over here, but I just think it would be a better place for it to live would be down below.
Oh, yeah. It would be a better place for the Yeti to live in the valleys, definitely, than on the top of the mountain. Again, I am still pondering in my mind why a creature would live on the top of the mountain. I mean, there probably are some advantages to that, but you might go into that in a few minutes.
They found Yeti nests in some of those forests. Like those stick formations and stick nest-looking things. They found some of those in the forest, is what Tim was saying.
Okay, yeah, that's a common behavior attributed to many different types of Sasquatch. So that's to be expected. And again, I think the forest Yeti is more likely to exist than the snow Yeti. Let me just throw a crazy theory out there just for a second. Maybe the Yeti, the original Yeti, is the forest Yeti. And the ones perhaps that live high in the mountains could be exiles perhaps of some sort. Because you see this in lion prides where certain lions get kicked out of the pride, and then you find these lions living in solitary conditions in areas that aren't so good because they don't have, they get kicked out and they don't get the best hunting grounds. They live in places where there's not a lot of water because they're detached from the pride. So perhaps these Yetis that are seen in the mountains are kind of like those lions. They get kicked out of the Yeti social group and they have to live in a place that's very inhospitable.
Yeah, that's true. Well, sorry to change the subject real quick, but I was going to talk about the Bhutan Yeti specifically for a little bit. Here's a quick couple facts. The forest still covers 70% of the country of Bhutan. Sorry, swallow. Bhutan's a spectacularly mountainous country about the size of Switzerland, with less than 1 million inhabitants, most of whom live in the valleys, not in the mountains. Tigers, leopards, and bears still wander the rugged slopes, and so does, according to legend, the Migwai, which is Bhutanese called the Yeti. And the people of Bhutan believe to this day the existence of the snowman, or the creature that lives up high. Numerous yak herders have claimed either to have seen the animal or have discovered its tracks crossing high-bound mountain passes. And what's weird is in Bhutan, there's not very many roads. So I guess large amounts of people have to cross these small amount of roads. And apparently they said that you find the tracks frequently in Bhutan. I guess it's where the Yeti is sighted, one of the most in the world. besides Tibet and Nepal, is Bhutan. It says that abominable snowmen, are pictured in old Tibetan and Bhutanese scrolls, manuscripts, and wall murals. According to these drawings, there are lengthy descriptions of the elusive creature, its habits, appearance, and accounts of its attacks on humans and yaks. So they actually have a written history, an oral history, I guess, of this creature attacking people, animals. So they're saying it's a carnivore, in a sense, or it's an omnivore. And what's kind of different is if you look at the old Nepal wall scrolls, they were saying that it ate roots and bushes. So that's weird. I guess, like Nick was saying, it could have adapted to its environment, or it's an omnivore.
Yeah. Or it could just be fighting for territory. Or it could just have been fighting for territory as well, but this is kind of a side note.
Brent fights for his territory.
Every day.
But here's another quick note. Brent likes this too. It's called the Sekten Wildlife Sanctuary. It was set up as an exclusive habitat for the Bhutanese Yeti. This 253 square mile sanctuary in eastern Bhutan is unique, and it's the only reserve in the world specifically created to protect the habitat of the Yeti. And the Yeti differs, the Bhutan Yeti differs from other Yetis in the other regions, is what it says. The body is covered in hair that may be anything from reddish-brown to black, and its face is hairless. It smells pretty bad, apparently, and has the power to become invisible, say some of the individuals. What's kind of an odd depiction is some people say the feet are on backwards, so who knows? So what's weird is it's actually described more like an American Sasquatch than a Yeti. This creature has black hair or reddish-brown. They don't even state at all that this creature is white or gray in color. So this creature lives more in mountains similar to what's over here.
That's interesting.
What do you think, Brent? Do you think that'd be pretty interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty cool.
So it's not like the snowman, like Nick was saying, we were talking about a minute ago. This creature actually lives down in the mountains of Bhutan aren't really, I mean, there's mountains all over the place, but the region that this creature sighted in are not really the snow-covered mountains.
Yeah.
And this sanctuary, apparently, is in the middle of nowhere. It's about 250 miles and a 2-day drive to get there. So I think that's pretty good. I guess it needs its own habitat or its own sanctuary if it's an endangered species.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, you said you wanted to go take a trip there, like you, me, and Brent were talking about at least like a year ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Brent, you still up to take a trip to the Sekten Wildlife Sanctuary?
Yeah, I'm still up for it.
Our plane would land in Bangladesh, and then we'd have to go drive around or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Well, somebody on here was telling me about, here it is. I wrote, a Yeti was reportedly captured in Russia in December 2011. A hunter reported having seen a bear-like creature trying to kill one of his sheep, but after he fired his gun, the creature ran into the forest on 2 legs. Border Patrol soldiers then captured the hairy 2-legged female creature that ate meat and vegetation. The creature allegedly was more similar to a gorilla than a bear, but its arms were shorter than the legs. It was about 2 meters or 6 feet tall. What do you think of that, Nick? Do you think that could possibly happen?
Yeah, I think it's possible.
Well, I thought that was interesting. You think that could be a hoax, or do you think that might have happened?
It sounds like it happened. I mean, if they actually caught the creature,
don't you know of some stories? I know Tim does, but don't you know of some stories that we've heard about people capturing Bigfoot?
I do know. I do remember one. There was one in Russia or something like that. That they like a town caught a Bigfoot or something like that.
I know there's one of it. There was a Bigfoot sleeping on the railroad tracks in Russia, and they captured it. Is that the one you're talking about?
I think so.
Yeah, I know that.
Well, here's some possible explanations for the Yeti, according to science. They say it's Gigantopithecus, which is a giant ape that lived long ago. I'll describe that in a minute. Or people think that it's a Himalayan brown bear. I find something wrong with the brown bear theory. Not every case could be attributed to the brown bear, because some of these people were actually physically attacked by this creature. Because the Yeti is an aggressive creature, by the way, from the stories I've heard. And apparently if you got your face kicked in by a Bigfoot, you know it's a Bigfoot, you know? And it says, this is why scientists don't believe it's Gigantopithecus. Scientists say the Yeti is usually described as a bipedal creature, and most scientists believe that Giganto was a quadrupedal creature, and that it was so massive that it had to walk like that, as some people say. And they said walking upright would have had been even more difficult for the now extinct primate than it is for the orangutan. But yeah, that's what I was saying, yeah. They say it would have been impossible for a Giganto to walk like that, apparently, like for long periods of time. But they're saying that it would be easier for an orangutan, so I guess they're giving some leg room. What do you think, Nick?
Well, yeah, I think that saying that all these sightings are Himalayan brown bear sightings it's quite an assumption to make. You probably can say that some of the sightings are attributable to the brown bear, but not all of them. The likelihood that Gigantopithecus survived in the Himalayas and Bhutan and just that region in general it's not. I really can't put, I guess, a mathematical odds on, because I'm not sure what that part of the world was like during the Ice Age.
It did primarily live over in that region of the world, though.
I guess if the animal could retreat to the mountains, into the caves, then perhaps there's a slight chance the Gigantopithecus did survive the Ice Age, or the many Ice Ages. I can't put a geologic time scale on these things because I can't recall them off the cuff, but it is a possibility that Gigantopithecus did survive.
Well, I have a quick report I was going to say before we have to end the show. There's a guy named Slawomir Rakiz. He has a book called The Long Walk that was published in 1956. He said that himself and some others were crossing the Himalayas in the winter of 1940, and their path was blocked for hours by two bipedal animals that were doing nothing but shuffling and playing around in the snow, he says. So he clearly said that these creatures were showing playful behavior, and they didn't care that the researchers were standing there. I thought that was kind of cool. They weren't really afraid of people.
Oh, yeah.
I guess why would you need to be if you're that big, I guess. But what do you think, Nick? Do you think that's a different type of story than you'd normally hear?
Yeah, it's a little different.
What do you think, Brent? Interesting?
Yeah. I mean, you usually don't hear about a story like that, but it's pretty cool.
Well, I hate to have to end the show now, but I had a few more notes. I guess I'll have to have a part 2 or something. But tune in next Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific for another episode of BFP Radio that's all new. Again, for this episode, for this week, I'd like to thank my co-hosts, everybody that contributed to the show this week, and our listeners for tuning in. And I'll let my co-hosts say their goodbye before we end the show for today.
Everybody take
Bye,
care.
everyone.
Again, thanks for listening, everybody. Again, tune in next week for another episode of BFP Radio.